174.
Well, good afternoon. We're continuing in our book of the prophet Hosea. So if you'd like to go ahead and open up there, we're starting that. Last week, I had a terrible kind of head cold, and oh man, it was a struggle. And so I feel like I kind of really botched that class. So I'm not going to totally repeat it, but we'll do a little bit of a review since it was the first lesson in bringing up the book of Hosea and its role and mission and things that it does for us. That's the timeline. The timeline is so important when we look at when he was writing this. We're looking around the time of Jeroboam II, and we're looking at the 8th century towards the early late century. He overlaps quite a few kings we'll look at. The prosperity was amazing. The economy was great. Everything in the nation was showing that they were doing wonderful, but they weren't spiritually. And that's kind of the problem that we see many times is when things are very prosperous and life is real easy, how quickly people forget their spiritual life and what's going on. Hosea prophesied for about 60 years over this timeline that he put together. Now, the book was compiled, so over lessons over a period of 60 years. It's actually one of the very first minor prophets that was gathered together and compiled by the Jews in the Second Temple period as a part of their scriptures. So it's kind of an important one. Many of the Jews believe that it was he was the most important prophet of his generation, and one of the only few of that timeline right around him that wrote and had it compiled his messages. The message is the same when we look at the other prophets and things and what's going on, but this is unique. Hosea is a message that is very difficult because it's very personal. And many times we have to see personal applications, things that would invoke an emotion within us that we could relate to, that help to really express how God feels. Sometimes we look at God and we separate God and we think, well, God's this, superior being and that he's just all stoic, but he's not. One of the things we learned through his prophets and through his own words is that he is a very compassionate, loving, and expressive father. And that role as well alone helps us to understand that he is not some cold-hearted deity. And in this is what brings about this most difficult aspect of Hosea, was that God had instructed him to marry a prostitute. And so there's a lot of struggles with just that alone that we talk about. And I just find some of the symbology is so powerful because emotionally we can relate to the idea if you're married or you've ever dated somebody and had somebody that you loved and cared about so much, and then they became unfaithful, and how horrible emotionally that would feel, and how you would just be devastated by that. And that's what God is saying. God is using that symbology to express to us the same feeling that we would have if our spouses were to go and be unfaithful to us, how it feels for him. And then also within the children as well. Now, it's interesting when we look at that first verse in the timeline, we very clearly know between the kings of Judah from Uzziah all the way through to Hezekiah. So we have a window for the kings who were ruling in the south. And then he, interestingly enough, just lists Jeroboam. Now, there's 6 more kings that come after him. But it's interesting, he doesn't mention them. Now, some scholars have said that it has to do with the 60-year period because it's possible that he was still alive in 722 and 720 when the Assyrians come in and attack. There's 3 different invasions that occur by the Assyrians. And the first one comes in and pretty much capitulates them into slavery and providing tribute to them. And then progressively, these invasions eventually lead them to being completely removed off the land. So it's possible that he doesn't list them after Jeroboam. Another one is that this is the end of the house of Jeroboam. That's what he's going to prophesy about. The other idea is that he moves and he leaves and he spends at the end of basically Hezekiah, he is down south And he may send messages, and he may go up, they said, travel, which I don't know how they would know these things, but I don't know that it's that significant. The thing that jumped out to me as I read this is the fact that there were 6 more kings after Jeroboam, the second, and they're not even listed. And this prophecy is about the fact that his house is going to stop. And within about 10 years, 15 years after this prophecy, it comes to happen. And who would think? That's the whole thing. Within 30 years of this, the Assyrians are going to invade. And if you're sitting there that prosperous and militarily, they were very secure. And by the way, Jeroboam II was a mighty warrior. He was a very strong leader, very popular. And so to speak out against him and to try to infer that somehow our nation's going to fall, well, how can God be blessing us and have such a wonderful leader, and you're sitting there preaching at us gloom and, everything's going to fall apart? So it wasn't a popular message, but it was a needful one. So when we look at the structure of the book, there's basically 3 sections that is the way that these are organized. And I say organized because, like sermons, a lot of times, like I preach sermons that are on topics of worship. I preach sermons throughout the year on authority and different things. And so I'm sure that he didn't just have one set of sermons that he preached and then a second and third set. These are a composite and helping to show a larger structure. And that's another thing about the book of Hosea, is to show a wisdom. And this is something that I had always missed, is this revelation of wisdom to the people who were reading this. A lot of this was compiled, like I said, in the second temple. So that meant that when the people came back from captivity from Babylon, that they assembled his writings. And then so the people that were reading this are the Judeans, the Jews who returned, and that they're the ones who are reading it. And it was a book to say, wake up, guys, look at this. Look at Israel. Use this as an example of a nation that had this prosperity and learn from these lessons. So the way it was structured and put together was something that Hosea wrote it, but it was compiled by a writer a century later. But the first one is Judgment and Hope, and that's the first 3 chapters. And then the unfolding judgment. Unfolding. In other words, it becomes more and more revealed that he's showing these excursions. Now, what's really neat, and we'll do it, but historically, we can go and see that within the lifetime of these people, a lot of times the prophets will prophesy something, and it's like way out. No one around is going to be around to see this happen, not this one. There were prophecies that Hosea was preaching that people were alive and saw it. And some of those were those incursions by the Assyrians and coming in and punishing them. So it's an unfolding revelation that the structure has been set up. And then the other one, which is fantastic, is this idea of the unfolding hope. No matter what God has done, because of his love, we should never forget that what he does for us is to show us that he is the only way that we can be prosperous and be secure. And it's because of his love for us that he disciplines us, he corrects us, and that he's trying to show us a way to come back. And that no matter how harsh the discipline is that he inflicts upon us, that it's for us. And it's not catastrophic. It's not the end of the world. That these disciplines, there's always, in a time of darkness, of discipline and things, that there's always light. There's always hope. And I think that's a very real lesson for us as well, that no matter what's happening to us in our lives, if it's sin has overwhelmed us, if we're going through some form of punishment or consequences of our sin, that there's always hope. It's never gone. We will always be able to have that. And so I see that the way just this book is structured, the way that we see this judgment. Judgment comes because of what? Because of an infraction of righteousness, a violation, sin. And then within that judgment, he is providing hope. And then the unfolding of this judgment is kind of like the judge reading and revealing why and such, and reading the indictment and all the charges and everything that's going on and why this is now going to occur. And at the end of it, like a sentencing, you're going to be sentenced to so long, but you have parole, you have certain things, and you can be fully restored. So we're going to pick up on the first part. We're not going to get all the way through chapter 3. We're going to look and focus in on chapter 1 because it really sets that symbolism that's so imperative to help understand the rest of this unfolding judgments that are going to come against them. And so when we start out, again, we have the days, but in verse 2 is where he just jumps right to it. It's when the Lord spoke through Hosea, the Lord said to Hosea, go and take to yourself a wife of whoredom and have children of whoredom, for the land commits great whoredom for forsaking the Lord. Now, so he goes, he took Gomer, the daughter of Debiam, and she conceived and she bore him a son. So right away, he goes and he follows through, which is a very difficult thing for a righteous man. I mean, just imagine how that would feel when you tell everybody, guess what? I'm marrying Gomer. Oh, the prostitute? You couldn't get somebody better? You can imagine all the family like saying, can we talk? Hosea, come over here. Let me give you some counsel. Why would you do that? Now, I want you to think about God. Now, think about God for a moment. When God said, the Israelites that are enslaved, I'm married to them. I'm in a covenant. And a lot of the angels and everybody going, are you sure? Look at them. Look at, look at those guys. And then they prove it, don't they? When they come out of the land, they're unfaithful. They can't maintain. They're always complaining and griping and blah. But God's love, he's the husband in this. And that's what we need to remember as we go through this, is understanding that God is the husband. God is Hosea. And God has taken one that is completely unworthy and brought the Israelites into this beautiful relationship of bonding, an intimate spiritual relationship. But we can't maintain our faithfulness. Gomer couldn't maintain her faithfulness. And that's the lesson he's trying to show to Israel. It's the same thing. And hopefully they would wake up and go, whoa, if that was me, I would have never done it. Yeah, that's right. So, you see how blessed you are, how gracious God is to you, that you're the prostitute, I'm the prostitute, and yet God still loves me. So he goes ahead and we pick up back in the text here, and she has a son. And the Lord said to him, call his name Jezreel, for in a little while I will punish the house of Jehu for the blood of Jezreel, and I will put an end to the kingdom of the house of Israel. And on that day I will break the bow of Israel in the valley of Jezreel. Now Jezreel is a valley, but it's also, if we go back historically and look in 2 Kings 10, the house of Ahab, which, one of the most wicked, Jezebel, remember those? That couple there, the dynamic duo of evil, that's what I call them. How horrible they were. After Ahab is killed and one of his sons starts to rule, but Jezebel's still around. And Jehu was one of the commanders of Ahab's force, doesn't take it upon himself. He's actually exercising the judgment that God had given to him. And so he goes about annihilating and breaking the house of Ahab. But he goes way beyond it. And so he destroys the house of Ahab, and in that process, he ends up killing the king of Judah, Ahaziah. Now, Ahaziah was not a good king. Ahaziah was in cahoots with him, and actually it happened to be on the same day that Jehu attacks at Jezreel. And as they're attacking the city, there's this messenger trying to figure out, is Jehu on our side? What's going on? And it lures out the king of Israel, and he goes out, and Jehu shoots an arrow, kills him, and then the king from Judah all of a sudden tries to flee and run away, and he kills him. And this total genocide of Ahab's family, but he goes beyond. He has 70 sons, Ahab, and his sons, he sends a message to one of the cities and says, everyone that's in there, I want you to kill them. And they cut all their heads off and put them in bags. They bring them to the valley of Jezreel, and they set them out. And then there's some sons of King Ahaz from Judah end up getting caught up, and Jehu catches them, and guess what he does? He annihilates them as well. So he goes way beyond it. So this is the house that Jeroboam, his grandfather. And so that's what's fascinating is one of the very first kids he brings up, God didn't forget. I mean, sometimes we think that some of these horrific things that go on when God is saying, giving a mission to carry something out, and it goes beyond it, that God says, oh, okay, well, that's just consequences, collateral damage. Okay, he went a little too far. Okay, I'm okay. No, God's not okay with that. God's not okay with that. And that's coming back now as a judgment. So the first child alone is Jezreel, and that means to scatter. So it's very appropriate, isn't it? He is going to take the house of Jehu, which Jeroboam is king, and that's ruling at this time, the house will end. And in that same valley is where this is going to come to a climax. And it does. In 2 Kings 15:29, we read that in the days of Pekah, the king of Israel, he's the last one, Tiglath-Pileser, king of Assyria, came down and he captured the city, Gilead in Galilee, and all the land of Naphtali, and he carried the people away to Assyria. So that's what I mean when we start to see this in just short period of time, 6 kings, and they happen rapidly. After Jeroboam II dies, then all of a sudden we've seen within 2 months, his son dies and is taken over. Within a couple of more months, I mean, just within years, it's fast. And so the house just crumbles and falls away. So picking up in 6, she has another child. She conceived again and bore a daughter. And the Lord said to him, name her No Mercy, for I will have no mercy on the house of Israel to forgive them at all. But I will have mercy on the house of Judah, and I will save them by their Lord, their God. I will not save them by bow or by sword or by war or by horses or by horsemen. Fascinating. It's like, okay, the message is for Israel. But all of a sudden, he brings up Judah. It's like you're prophesying in the north, you're talking about their evilness. Judah, Hezekiah's king at this time, not a bad guy. I mean, he's got some waffle. He does some things, but he's not a bad king. Hezekiah's a good king. And we see this little cryptic prophecy right here in the middle of this horrific destruction where God will have no mercy. And that's what Lo Haramah means. The name in the Hebrew is Lo Haramah, which meant no mercy. I will show no pardon. It's a totality of abandonment. And that is a very harsh word that God rarely uses to show there's no end of this, that I am not going to let them come back. And they didn't. They never come back and establish any territory or any integrity as a tribes again. Remember, there's 10 tribes that comprise of this northern kingdom. They'll never come back. But I will have mercy on Judah. Now, the majority of the kings of Judah were good. I don't know if I could say majority. I don't know. I don't think so. But a lot of those kings were good and kind of postponed and showed some righteousness and such. But in this, now, where is this historical? So what's interesting is we see that when Sennacherib invades in 722, he comes in, and as he assaults and goes through and annihilates the 10 northern tribes, he proceeds and pushes further in, and he goes into the territory of Judah. And when he gets into Judah, he pronounces through his arrogant messenger that he is there to kill their God and to wipe them out. And you might as well just surrender. And remember, I mentioned this morning about how Hezekiah, rent his clothes and repented. And now listen to what this says. Let's come back to, now this is written before this happens, what Hosea says. He goes, I will not save them by bow, nor by sword, or by war, or by horses, or by horsemen. I'm going to save them, but I'm not going to do it with anything physical. And that's exactly what happened, isn't it? Because when they surrounded Jerusalem and they invaded into Judah, that one night, an angel of the Lord came upon them, and 185,000 died that night without a bow without a horse, without a horseman, exactly the way that Hosea had prophesied about. So that is a confirmation as well. And it's very interesting that I don't know how many people in Judah read this or heard this, but to be able to look backwards like we're doing today, and those who during the Second Temple period after the return from captivity could put that together and go, look at that. Hosea prophesied about this, how God was going to accomplish this and not have anyone. And you remember that? Hezekiah that night and all the men died, 185,000. There was no arrows, no bows. And it just helps to build their faith as well. So then 8, and when she had weaned no mercy, she conceived and bore a son. And the Lord said, call his name, not my people. For you are not my people, and I am not your God. That's called divorce. God is showing that he is finally done with them and that he is going to put them away. There are 3, within the 3 children's names, there's like 3 generations that God is kind of looking at that are going to come about. And the first one was Jezreel and the dynasty of Jezreel and the successors that were going to come after him. And then the second child is the daughter, representing kind of a effeminate type of representation of this period of the overthrow of that first dynasty, which is very interesting. And then not my people is this way that Jeroboam prosperity was not going to bring them any prosperity that could protect them. That this not, if without my protection, and when we're in that divorce state, then you have no blessings and you're going to receive nothing but punishment itself. And then 10 and 11, yet the number of the children of Israel shall be like the sand of the sea, which cannot be measured or numbered. And in the place where it is said to them, you are not my people, it shall be said to them, children of the living God. And the children of Judah and the children of Israel shall be gathered together, and they shall appoint for themselves one head, and they shall go up from the land, for great shall be the day of Jezreel. Right, the opposite. This is that hope again. Remember, he started out with this not my people, being scattered, all this stuff. And then all of a sudden, this sounds like, wow, what is this? Because we look back historically and we go, okay, he said they're not coming back and that they're going to be gone. And they didn't. They never came back. And a lot of people, they see that and they go, well, there's all these other prophecies that point out how that God is going to bless all the descendants, that all the tribes were going to receive this blessing. But we saw that the northern kingdom just went away and they never came back. They got assimilated out. But what we forget to remember is that when Jeroboam the first divided the kingdom and pulled away from Rehoboam in the south, when he established those idolatrous worship, a lot of people started going south. And throughout the 150, nearly 200 years, you find a lot of the different tribes were coming out and coming south and assimilated themselves into the territory of Judah. And we forget about it. It's kind of like, but they're there. And how do we know that? Well, look at this prophecy. Because when they go off into captivity, guess what? When Judah goes off, all of those who had come down that were representing from the 10 northern tribes are also taken off with them. And so what he's showing here, and you see that, the number of the children of Israel shall be like the sand of the sea. So they're not going to be totally annihilated genealogically. Territorially, they'll never come back. But genealogically, they will always be represented. And they were, but they were kind of hidden historically from us in a sense. We don't think about it by being assimilated in Judah, and Judah goes off to captivity and they come back. Guess who came back? Israel. Representation of all those tribes. And that's what he's showing here. And that they're going to prosper. They're going to grow. Now, something else you see is that he said at one time, the very place in which I said, you're not my people, guess what? I'm going to call you my people. Judah is going to come back and occupy these areas. And he says, now I will call you my people. Again, you see this unity occurring. And this occurred after the Babylonian captivity when all the tribes come back. And guess what? They're led by Zerubbabel, which is looked at, he's the king or governor was placed in by King Cyrus, and he comes back with Nehemiah and with Ezra, and Zerubbabel becomes kind of a Christ figure type because of the idea of bringing all of the scattered together and unified into one. And they become one. They are no longer divided like they were at the days of Jeroboam and Rehoboam when they split. From the time they come back from captivity, they are now one. And what is really amazing, they totally abolish idolatry. That seems to be the trick. It seems you never hear of idolatry again when they come back from Judah. It's like, we got that lesson down. If we got one thing down, we got that lesson down. They never went back to idolatry again, because that was the very thing that let them off. And so they're all going to be together, pointed one head, which was going to be the king Zerubbabel, and they're going to go up in the great day of this. So going from scattering, Jezreel, which that's what it means, is now the great place of scattering will be the great place of coming back together. So within just this first chapter, we start to see the setup of this dynamic relationship of God trying to express to people about his intimate relationship with him and what he has gone through, and the emotional duress that is created upon him that it would you and I, and that he is going to go through with this, but yet at the same time, there is this ultimate reconciliation that's going to be wonderful. Well, that's chapter 1. We'll get into chapter 2 next week and continue to look at the unfaithfulness of Israel and the punishment and the continued symbology and use of this, of Gomer and the illicit relationship that they have and how God is applying it to them. If you're with us this evening and there's something we can do to help you in your relationship, no matter who you are, no matter what's going on, if we can help you in prayers or anything else, we hope that you would please allow us to serve you. If there's somebody online that needs guidance or help in their relationship with God, we hope as well you'd reach out and let us assist you in guiding you to God's forgiveness and his salvation. So let's think about these things while we stand and we sing.